So, is anybody at the very least surprised that Anthony Joshua versus Franklin is having a hard time selling in comparison to UFC 286? By the way, both in London and both in the O2 Arena. Now, the minute that Edwards and Usman was out on ticket sales, it sold within minutes. Now, if you look at the date on Joshua versus Franklin, which is April 1st, not too far away, perhaps maybe just a couple of weeks, if not less, depending on when you're listening to this. But nonetheless, it kind of shows and reflects what's going on with boxing in comparison to MMA, and something that we've known for a very long time, which is that boxing has been dying in the sense of promotion. I see it with a lot of the content creators in boxing. They just don't know what they're going to talk about. What are you going to talk about? How Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford are the two best guys in the world, but somehow are not willing to prove it and are just willing to show that they're the two best guys in the world without actually touching each other or getting into a competitive, matchup, or even challenging themselves in other weight divisions or this and that, of which we've only seen with none other than Canelo. The guy goes out and takes risks. He wins big matches, but he also loses big matches based on the risks that he takes. This is what you see in mixed martial arts. With Usman, he didn't have to fight Leon Edwards for the second time that he did back in August of 2022 in Salt Lake City, in which he lost his welterweight championship to the now current second British world welterweight champion in Leon Edwards. He didn't have to give him a shot because he already beat him back in 2015, but at some point, it was like as if it was inevitable that Leon Edwards is going to get the title shot, and so he did. And it kind of shows you that even though Leon Edwards is not a very popular guy in the recent times of him leading up to his championship, although the one thing that you have to understand is that what a lot of this reflects, being that the UFC was able to sold in a couple of minutes in comparison to Joshua and Franklin struggling at the moment, is that the UFC as a product in and of itself does not need any fighters. And they even hinted just now, and if you're listening to this, you probably just got done also listening to the press conference of UFC 286, in which one of the journalists hinted that Colby Covington perhaps was flying in to weigh in tomorrow as a replacement for the two possibilities of any of these guys falling out. And you got to think, if that's the case, will that affect the pay-per-view numbers to any degree? Probably not. And I'll tell you why. Because the way that the UFC holds its business is strictly on the basis of the fact that it is an organization that doesn't need any individuals as a promotion. Whereas with Anthony Joshua, he is a brand and a promotion in and of himself. To which I think a lot of people are really losing interest in Anthony Joshua, and let me tell you why. Well, for one, Anthony Joshua, as you understand, is a very awkward person, very awkward guy in the way that he approaches people or this and that. It's like he has something to hide, or he has something to not want to reveal to anybody. And that goes with the territory of being the spokesman for none other than Under Armour Hammer, right? He's the guy for that brand. He is the spokesman for that brand. He does commercial shoots with Hugo Boss. He's got a commercial with Dre Beats. He has commercial with Under Armour, as I've mentioned. So he has to be this politically correct guy. And then not only that, he also has to be winning. And guess what? If you're not winning in the recent times that he's been, it's like almost as if his brand means absolutely nothing. Now, what led to this? Perhaps maybe the Usyk fight. If you guys remember, during the Usyk fight, Anthony Joshua came out and said something to the effect that, man, you know what? I've been hustling for this. I've been training hard for this, but it just wasn't good enough. And he was just in absolute despair and in disbelief that he had just lost for the second time because he knew that this was going to be affecting his brand big time. And now we see the implications of this, which is what's happening in the Franklin fight, being that it's having a hard time selling because a lot of people are having a hard time believing in Anthony Joshua. Well, where did this start? Well, first off, if you're going to play this media-friendly type of personality in Anthony Joshua, and then all of a sudden you end up turning up your roadman situation going on where you want to reveal to the world that you're this gangster or this and that you had all these issues growing up, or you didn't start boxing in time. Now you're basically going out of character in the brand that you were marketing in the first place. Whereas in the beginning, you could have just been honest and say, hey, you know what? I'm a thug dude from Watford, England, and I'm going to conduct myself in that way in the same similar fashion as Mike Tyson conducted himself in the 1980s. But he didn't do that. And that's not the guy that we know, and that's not the guy that we think he is. And then on top of the fact that he's losing, it just almost created this aspect of, well, what's the point of watching this? We're just watching Anthony Joshua take on a guy who had just recently lost to Dillian Whyte, and he even promised Dillian Whyte that he was going to fight him if he had won this fight. Well, guess what? It was a very close fight in the way that you want to put it. I guess it went the distance, but it went in the way of Dillian Whyte, and so he doesn't give the fight to Dillian Whyte. Instead, he gives it to none other than Franklin, because perhaps it's a much easier out for him. But nonetheless, the UFC remains a brand of supremacy in combat sports because it doesn't need anyone. It doesn't need any particular person. It doesn't even need Francis Ngannou, as you've seen what happened in recent times. And by the way, the fact that he could possibly fight Deontay Wilder now. And then on top of that, it doesn't need people like Conor McGregor, even as famous and as rich as he is, and as the type of figure that he has been to bring in all these revenues and audience to the UFC. Still, they can easily replace him with 5 other guys that can compensate for what he doesn't do when he's not fighting. In terms of pay-per-view numbers, in terms of negotiations that they're going to have with fighters that they could pay a whole lot less. And here's another thing you guys got to understand. The reason why the UFC is able to pull off these fights the way that they do is because of the fact that they have an ironclad contract with these guys and have some of the best lawyers in the world, and how they can lock these guys down for any number of reasons. And for one, here's one of the ways that the UFC negotiates with you. If you lose a fight, which more than likely you will, in the way that they set up the fights to have constant 50-50 matchups, the idea of you being a 23, 26-0, 40-0 type of fighter that they have in boxing where they fight a bunch of nobodies, it's going to be almost impossible, because now you're in the top league where consistency of losing is a matter of fact. And when you're, let's say, in a highly competitive sport like the NBA or NFL or Premier League soccer or rugby or the NHL or MLB, you're constantly taking on the best teams in the world at the league that you're designated at. A league that is designated to have all the best players and the best teams in the world. So the chances of you winning every match or every game, it's almost impossible. Even if you are Manchester City, who are in a hot streak right now in soccer, they still lose games, but not a lot. They win more games than others, but they still lose games, but not a lot in comparison to others. Same thing with the 1996-1997 Bulls. They had a record of 72-10 out of 82 games. Okay, they won 72 matches, but they lost 10. But okay, you won 72. Same thing in amateur wrestling, as Kamaru Usman referenced having over 300 matches in wrestling throughout his college, high school, and middle school career. And throughout that time, what is the measurement that you try to understand? Is the fact that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but mostly you're going to win. And that's also what he referenced in going into this fight with Leon Edwards, is that was one blemish that doesn't reflect the overall numbers of what I could possibly and potentially do. But nonetheless, that is the competitive architecture that the UFC is under. The best guys fighting the best guys, and that is the reason why people come back for more. Now, when you have a situation like Anthony Joshua where you're trying to build him up, and then you're bringing in a guy who had lost his previous match to a guy that was supposed to be designated as a rematch for Anthony Joshua, and it never happened. And yet Dylan White doesn't even have an injury. So you got to think to yourself, there's a lot of cop-out that goes on in boxing. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence, Usyk versus Fury, and then you had Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder for years not being able to make things happen. And now you have this going on with the current situation with Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia going at it in April. Now that's a big fight. That's a good one. And then you have Devin Haney taking on Lomachenko. But yet, other people want to see him take on Josh Taylor. So there are some fights that are being made in boxing, but for the most parts, there's not. And with the UFC, there's one thing that you're always going to guarantee is that they're always going to give you the theater of the unknown no matter what. And that is the reality of boxing versus MMA in the current landscape of combat sports. Enjoy.